What if I told you that some of the most fundamental concepts we think we know, ideas that are foundational to scripture, might actually be based on a huge mistranslation? What if the key to unlocking a much deeper meaning has been hiding in plain sight this whole time?
All right, let's just dive right in with a big one, the Day of Judgment. We all have this image in our heads of some massive, far-off future event. But what if that whole interpretation just misses the point? What if it's something way more personal and honestly happening right now?
So, to really get this, we have to make a pretty radical shift in how we think. We need to stop reading scripture like it's just a history book about specific people from long ago and start seeing it as a guide to our own minds, to the human psyche.
A huge piece of the puzzle comes down to this one idea, conflating. It's really just a word for mixing two different things together until you can't tell them apart. And for centuries, we've been reading the Quran and seeing only historical figures, when the text might actually be pointing us toward these universal templates, or what we can call prototypes.
Let's use a central figure to make this super clear. On one side, you have Muhammad bin Abdullah, the historical man who lived about 1400 years ago. But on the other hand, the Quran also talks about Muhammad not just as a name, but as a title, a function, almost like a template for a highly evolved human being, a role that anyone in any time could aspire to. So, when we say prototype, what we're really talking about is a pattern, a template for a certain kind of personality or a specific function. Think of Pharaoh. He's not just one specific king in ancient Egypt. He's the prototype for arrogance, for tyranny, a pattern that can show up in any person, in any system. These figures are basically maps to our own inner worlds. Okay, so keeping that idea of prototypes in mind, let's circle back to the Day of Resurrection, or AL-QIYAAMAH, because this is where a potential mistranslation could have had the biggest impact on how we understand everything.
So if you look at most translations, Al-Qiyamah is translated as the Day of Standing. It sounds very literal, very physical, right? And that one single choice of a word, well, it has shaped belief for centuries.
And from that literal translation, we get that classic image, all of humanity, standing in line, just waiting for some final external judgment on a single day way off in the future. But what if standing in this context never meant physically standing at all?
And here it is. This is the heart of the proposed correction. The root of the word qiyamah isn't just about physically standing. It's about rising up, raising your standards. It's about the lifting up, the uprising, the upgrading of our own moral and ethical thoughts. It suddenly becomes an internal psychological event, not some external future one. I mean, this reframes everything. It's no longer a date on a calendar we're waiting for. Instead, it becomes a continuous process of self-evaluation. Think about that. It means your day of resurrection could be right now. It's any moment you decide to consciously raise your moral and ethical game.
So, what does this personal resurrection actually look like? Well, it's kind of like a three-step cycle. First, you start with some deep pondering, really reflecting on your thoughts and your actions. That reflection then leads to self-correction, where you make conscious changes. And the result of that is a genuine moral and rational upgrade to your inner self. That is your personal Al-QIYAAMAH.
Now, this whole pattern of potential mistranslation isn't just for these big, heavy theological concepts. It actually shows up in one of the most common greetings in the Muslim world, which just goes to show you how deep these linguistic shifts really go.
At a glance, these two phrases look almost exactly the same. But that tiny little definite article at the beginning, as, changes literally everything. As-salam is a divine attribute of God, meaning the source of all peace. The greeting the Quran actually suggests for humans is simply salam alaikum, peace be upon you.
And the reason this matters is pretty significant. By saying assalamu alaikum to another person, you might be accidentally misapplying a divine attribute. No human can be the absolute source of peace, right? We can only wish peace for each other. It's a really subtle difference, but it's a profound one.
Okay, so let's pull all of this together. Let's see how reevaluating the language we use can completely change the entire goal of a spiritual journey.
When you make this shift in understanding, Scripture stops being just a collection of historical stories about the past. It becomes what's known as deen, which is more like a practical, active system, or even a debt that you repay through your actions. It's a blueprint for your own psychological and moral evolution.
So why does any of this really matter? Well, it transforms Scripture from something you just believe in to a tool you can actually use. The day of resurrection isn't something you wait for anymore. It becomes a daily practice. This whole perspective empowers you to take charge of your own spiritual growth. The goal becomes self-realization, not just blind belief, and it all hinges on understanding the language.
So, in the end, the goal from this perspective isn't to create followers who are just waiting around for some future event. The real point is to evolve the human being as a conscious thinker and decision maker, to become someone who is actively, consciously engaged in their own evolution right here, right now.
So really, this interpretation presents scripture not as a list of rigid rules, but as an invitation. It's describing a path to becoming a better, more conscious, more evolved human being. The only question left is, are you ready to start your upgrade?